Hello and welcome to Ask a Mechanic. Welcome back to part 2 of the Nissan Figaro. Now in part 1 we established what the issues were with the engine. We had blows on the turbo gaskets, we had a distributor cap and rotor arm with not a great deal of meat left on them, we had spark plugs with a very wide gap and perished ignition leads. So today we've come back, we've got all the parts and we're going to see what we can do to repair it. Come with me. Right, so we are here and we are back with the Figaro. First job we're going to do is the one that's going to take us the longest, which is the turbo gaskets. We've got those 3 bolts to undo there, there's one under the bottom, and then there's another flange here to take off. Then we can take the turbo unit out, we can put new gaskets in, and we can put it all back together. Let's see how we get on. Right, what an arse that was. But we've eventually managed to get all the bolts out which hold in the exhaust side of the turbo. So let's have a quick look and see what we're working with. That is what is left of the gasket for the side that joins to the downpipe, and that is the state of the gasket which goes to the manifold. Now this O-style gasket is not what we're going to be putting back on. We're going to be putting back on a square shaped gasket which hopefully should hold a little bit better. Let's crack on. Right, here we are with the new gaskets. We've got that one for the downpipe and that one for the turbo 2 manifold. I think you'll agree they're in slightly better condition. Let's get on with it. What we've taken out is studs. What we're going to put back in is bolts, simply so that if this ever happens again, it's much easier to take apart again. We're obviously going to put lock washers on these bolts to make sure they don't rattle loose like the nuts did last time. Right, if you remember from last time, we didn't have a bolt the right length. Now I found one bolt the right length, which I put in. However, I've got 3 more, which I need to cut down. So what we're going to do, we're going to measure whereabouts it needs to go, and then go and cut it. Top tip when you're cutting bolts, always put a nut on, because when you cut the bolt with a grinder, it'll damage the thread in the bolt. And as you wind that nut off over the damaged thread, it will repair the thread. 1 cut bolt. So now what we have is 3 cut bolts the right length, 3 lock washers to go in the remaining 3 holes. Well, that's the fiddliest job done. Put the rest of the engine bay back together and then set about replacing the ignition system. And as if by magic, everything is all back together. So now it's time to start replacing the other bits, and we're going to start with the spark plugs. When you're replacing spark plugs, it's always best to use a spark plug socket, which looks like that. It's got a little rubber bung in the end which grips onto the top of the plug. Just makes them easier to get in and out, especially if they're in a recessed head. Right, we've got the first plug out, ready to replace it with a new one. There's the 2 side by side. As you can see, the new one's got quite a small gap compared to the larger gap on the old one. So let's get them all changed. One thing to remember about fitting spark plugs is that they should never ever be tight. So if you feel them start to tighten up as you're winding them in, then you've cross-threaded them. So gently back it out and try again. Right, all 4 plugs replaced. There's the old ones, ready for the bin. Next thing to change is the ignition leads. There are 5 leads in this set. They include 1 for each cylinder and what's called the king lead. Now the king lead goes between the distributor and the coil. Let's get them fitted. What we've done here is we've put the new HT leads onto the new distributor cap. And the reason why we've done that is to copy the position of the old HT leads on the old distributor cap. I happen to know that this engine, along with most other 4-stroke 4-cylinder petrols, the firing order is 1342. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all engines are, so you're always best to copy what's originally there. So this is our shiny new distributor cap with brand new contacts in it. Next step is to take off the old distributor and take out the old rotor arm. And let's look at the difference in condition. You've got one that's all crusty and corroded and generally looking pretty rubbish, and then we've got a brand new one. Interestingly, the old one that's come out is actually stamped Nissan, so my suspicion is that this is probably the first time the rotor arm has ever been changed. That is the new rotor arm on. That's a new distributor cap on and all tightened up. And if I have a look inside the old distributor cap, we'll see lots of corroded rubbish. So let's put the whole air intake system back together and then we'll fire up. We are all back together, so let's turn the key. As you can hear, although it's running a lot more smoothly, there is still an exhaust leak. While I was putting the turbo back together, I actually found that the gasket between the downpipe and the cat has also blown. I couldn't tell this before because the blow where the bolts were missing was so bad, and so that's something we're going to have to come back and do another day. Now we're going to set up the ignition timing, so I'll set up my timing light and I'll be back in a second. The timing on this needs to be 15 degrees after top dead center. So if I show you in here, there are marks down there which you might not be able to see. You can just about see them right down there on the timing cover, just there, which show the degrees of advance and retard of the timing. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the engine, we're going to set up the timing light, and we're going to see where we are. Top tip when you're doing timing, always carry Tipp-Ex. If you paint white the timing mark that you're looking for, it's much easier to see under the light of the gun. I can just about see the old timing mark on the pulley, and it's a little bit too far advanced. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start it up and adjust it using the distributor. Now what you would normally do is you'd have one person on the timing light and you'd have one person adjusting the distributor. Unfortunately, because I'm on my own, I need to do both jobs at once. If we have a look now, I've tightened up the distributor and we'll just double check the timing again. As you can see, those marks line up. Wonderful. Right, well then, we have a pile of dead parts. We have a car which is running as well as it possibly can be until we get that other exhaust gasket sorted. The chap who owns the car is quite happy with it as it is at the moment. We'll get that exhaust gasket sorted at another time, but for the minute, you can use it again. That concludes the second part of our Nissan Figaro fix. We will be back to do some more work on it a little bit later on, probably within the new year, to sort out the rest of those exhaust leaks, but for the time being, at least the owner can now drive it. If you'd enjoyed these videos, please do follow and subscribe. You never know, you might learn something. Bye for now.